Okay, first I want to thank Shoshana Wieder for showing my slides here today. Thank you, Shoshana, and thank you so much, Bonnie, for inviting me here to talk to the SBAG today. Always some of the best interactions I'm able to have are when I get to speak with the AGs, and of course looking forward to when we can all actually meet together in person again. But thank you again for having me. And let's go ahead and kick things off. Shoshana, next slide, please. So the first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge that we just recently had a budget that was appropriated over the holidays. And if you can flip to the next slide, I'll give you some of the highlights of that budget. This is the appropriations, the 2021 consolidated appropriations. Really demonstrated very, very strong continued support for all of NASA science, with $7.3 billion overall for all of NASA science, which is $994 million above the 21 president's budget request and $162 million over what was enacted by Congress for FY 2020. So all very positive signs from Congress. For planetary science in particular, the appropriation is $40 million above our presidential request, which is all good news. Within that budget, there's funding to support the decadal priorities, such as Mars sample.
So the key takeaway from this slide, of course, is that we've had incredible support from Congress, continued support for science at NASA. I won't repeat everything that's written here. You've seen it. You can see across the bottom the increase in support over time, and the current appropriation, which is at $2.7 billion, even great support for all of our planetary programs. If we can go on to the next slide, please. And the next slide is our current snapshot of the Planetary Science Division mission fleet. This continues to just amaze me every day when I look at this. We are so incredibly lucky to be here at this time. There are now 30 missions on this fleet chart, about half of which are in development and the other half in operations. Just an absolutely incredible overall fleet, and as I'm going to talk about in a couple moments, and you're going to experience today during your SBAG and tomorrow during the SBAG presentations, an incredible year coming up for the small bodies community. Lots of amazing things going on. So let's go on to the next slide, please, and I'll hit on some of the highlights for 2021. Of course, the first big highlight, I know not particularly directly relevant to the SBAG community, but certainly important to all of us as planetary scientists, is going to be the landing of the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover on February 18th. We're all really looking forward to this. The event, as I said, is going to happen on February 18th with the landing in Jezero Crater. The rover will then spend the next couple of years driving around on the surface, characterizing the surface, looking for potential sites of high probability or potential probability for early biomarkers that could be preserved in Jezero Crater, and then collecting caches of rocks and soil to be saved on the surface of Mars for future sample return. Just if you are interested, the commentary for the live event are shown on the screen there. There's also what we call a landing minus 30 day, but it's actually going to be landing minus 22 days, live event happening tomorrow afternoon, which should be a fun event, including participation from NASA headquarters in JPL to start getting folks excited about the landing. Next slide, please. Of course, the other big news is OSIRIS-REx, and I know you've got Dante coming to speak with you later today. The OSIRIS-REx sample collection back in October was amazing. The precision with which the tag was executed, and potentially the size of the sample that's been collected are just almost overwhelming. We're very excited at the success of that mission. Of course, the sample's now been all buttoned up, and OSIRIS-REx is hanging out and will begin its trip back to Earth later in the spring. And I think Dante will have some more detailed information to share with you about what will be happening as part of that return. So you can look forward to that later this morning. Next slide, please. The next big thing on the Planetary Science Division's radar, of course, is launch of the double asteroid redirection test. I'm very, very excited to launch the first mission from the Planetary Defense Coordination Office to demonstrate the kinetic impact technique for deflecting the little moon Dimorphos that is part of the binary system with Didymos. We're working on this. Of course, COVID has been a challenge across the board in everything that we do. Every one of us here on the line has been impacted, and DART is looking at some challenges to the schedule. The primary launch window opens in July, on July 21st. I'm sure you'll hear more from the project on where we are with that. We're still sticking to that launch window, but there are some challenges associated with that. But we're still working to that. The team is firmly in its assembly, test, and launch operations. Held their pre-environmental review in January, and moving forward as well as they can with the hardware that they have in hand. The Lycia CubeSat from Italy is going through its integration and test, and is on track for its delivery in May of 2021. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that from that team a little later as well. Next slide. And the next big thing on the horizon for Planetary Science Division is the launch of Lucy, which is going to happen in October. The launch window opens in October of 2021. And Lucy mission is staying on schedule, doing very well. Really, this will be, of course, the first mission to the Trojan asteroids with 7 flybys in 12 years. Focused on surveying that diversity of that, to date, unexplored population of asteroids in Jupiter's orbit. ATLO for Lucy began in August of 2020, and they now, I can report just as of the last week or so, they now have the entire payload on site at Lockheed Martin in Littleton, Colorado. And so beginning the final stages of that integration and test, with expected shipment to the Cape later in the spring, or I'm sorry, probably in the summertime. So really exciting that Lucy's on the horizon. Is the next big thing for Planetary. As I said, really big year for Planetary as a whole, and almost all of those big highlights are related to small bodies missions. Next slide, please. I wanted to also just acknowledge New Horizons continues to do fantastic work. Continuing to download data from the flyby of Arrokoth. There's expected 24 new papers to be published in Icarus, a special issue, with many papers on the Pluto system, Kuiper Belt, and the Arrokoth flyby results. A note here that the Subaru and other large telescopes have been searching through the KBO population. Almost 100 new objects discovered in 2020, and New Horizons is, of course, making its own observations of some of these objects out there in the KBO, in the Kuiper Belt. The new flight software packages that will enhance capabilities for 5 of the 7 payload instruments will be uplinked in 2021. And they continue, of course, to make their deliveries to the Planetary Data System, which is great for the community. And they're also using the LORRI imaging system to discover 2 KBOs found closer together than any binary pair before. The discovery was announced at the DPS meeting in the fall. So New Horizons continuing to make new discoveries and continuing to do great work. Next slide, please. And Psyche. So Psyche is the next thing on the radar for the launch in 2022 for Planetary Science. So again, another great mission we're really excited about. And despite the COVID challenges that they have experienced, COVID came at a really hard time for Psyche when they are really kind of in their, peak of development. But they're working through. They're doing a great job. They recently passed their system integration review, and in fact, we have a meeting this afternoon to hopefully approve them to go ahead and move forward into their phase D, which is the integration and test phase, the final integration and test. So looking forward to that. The SpaceX Falcon Heavy vehicle was selected as their launch vehicle about a year ago in February of 2020. And the team have made a decision to change the provider for their magnetometer. I'm sure you'll hear more about this when you hear from that team. they've now decided to go with the Technical University of Denmark to provide the magnetometer. And the science team is working on a spacecraft overview, special collection of papers. So that should be fun. And so looking forward, as I said, they're about to begin their assembly, test, and launch operations. And so a lot of big deliveries coming up, delivery of the Maxar spacecraft, and again, that start of the assembly, test, and launch operations. So we'll be watching them over the next year as they start to pull that spacecraft together. Next slide, please. We are continuing to work very closely with the Japanese Space Agency on their planning for the Mars Moons Explorer, the MMX mission, focused on a sample return from Mars's moon Phobos. NASA is committed to providing the Magane, gamma ray, and neutron spectrograph for that mission, as well as a pneumatic sampler that will be a complement to the deeper sampler that will be provided by JAXA. So the mission will actually contain two different sampling systems, the pneumatic sampler from the US, as well as some other mission support that we will be providing. So we have a very close, strong collaboration with JAXA on this mission. MMX passed its project approval review back in December 2019, a little over a year ago, and is continuing to move forward in a really positive way. Both Magane and P-Sampler passed their preliminary design reviews and are going forward in their development. And the launch for MMX is planned for September of 2024. Next slide, please. NEO Surveyor has been a long time in the making. This is a mission that is designed specifically. It's a strategic directed mission specifically designed to meet the Georgie Brown near-Earth object survey goal, with objectives to find 65% of the undiscovered potentially hazardous asteroids, 140 meters or larger, within 5 years, and a goal of reaching 90% of discovery in 10 years. The spacecraft is an infrared telescope that's capable of estimating sizes directly from those infrared signatures, can compute the cumulative chance of impact over the next century for those PHAs that are greater than 50 meters, and will deliver the new tracklet data daily to the Minor Planet Center. So a very capable mission. They have passed some important reviews over the last several months, and we are moving, albeit somewhat slowly, but steadily towards a KDPB to get that mission going into its formulation later in the spring. We do already have a formulation authorization document and a formulation agreement signed, and the PLRA with the level ones and those types of information is nearing signature. We're coming to agreement on that as well. So things are moving forward with this, as I said, albeit slowly, but we are trying to move that and keep that moving forward. Next slide, please. A few updates on some of our other programs. So I'll talk a little bit about Simplex, because there has been some recent activity here in Simplex. For the Simplex 1, these were the CubeSats that were selected under a ROSES call several years ago. There were 2 missions that were selected through that ROSES call, the first being QPACE, which is the particle acceleration and collision experiment to look at collision of particles at low velocity in low or microgravity. QPACE was actually launched on January 17th on Virgin Orbit's Launcher 1, which is a great milestone for that mission. Unfortunately, as of today, we haven't been able to, or the PI has yet to be able to detect the spacecraft's beacon. This is not altogether unsurprising. We expected it to take a little bit of time, but you know, he's still looking, and others have been marshaled around the country and other places to try and detect that beacon, and we're still listening. So we hope to hear from QPACE soon, and wishing that team all the best and hoping for their success. LunaMap was the other mission selected through that ROSES call, and it is moving towards a delivery in March of this year. I think the last I heard is it might be a little bit late, but it is moving forward, and is planned to launch on the Artemis 1 mission, which is currently scheduled to launch no later than 2021, but stay tuned on that. That may change as well. So exciting milestones for both of those early Simplex CubeSats. For Simplex 2, this was the AO from a couple years ago, and there were, of course, 3 missions selected through that Simplex 2 call. Janice, I see that you have on the list today, or on the list for your agenda, so that's great. I know you'll be hearing some great news from them. They passed their KDPC in September, which means that they're now in their phase C, and they've been confirmed to go forward. So very, very excited about that mission there. And of course, it will ride with Psyche when it launches in 2022. Lunar Trailblazer also just passed their key decision point C on November 24th. So they've now been confirmed and are moving forward, and they're actually going to launch on a heliophysics mission, IMAP, in 2024, or I'm sorry, in 2025. The third Simplex mission was Escapade, which is the 2 spacecraft to fly to Mars to look at atmospheric loss. That mission has finished their preliminary design review, but we've postponed the KDPC until the summertime. We're in part looking for alternate rideshare opportunities. They were going to ride with Psyche. That was not an optimal combination for Escapade and Psyche, so we're looking for a different launch opportunity for Escapade. Next slide, please. Looking forward, new opportunities. Next slide. Let's talk about Discovery and New Frontiers. The Discovery 2019 process remains more or less on schedule despite COVID. The teams were able to each deliver, all 4 teams delivered their concept study reports on time just before the holidays. And so they're now, those CSRs are now going through the process of review. The current schedule is that the Step 2 selections are expected no earlier than about June this summer. So we're looking towards that time for those selections. For New Frontiers, Dragonfly continues to make great progress. The team are doing good things and continuing to move that mission forward. And we're also looking forward to the next New Frontiers call, New Frontiers 5, to be released in fall of 2022. You can see here that there was a community announcement that came out in November, and Kurt Niebuhr has been on a campaign to engage with all of the ags and with the community, and I know that he's on the agenda after Tom and I this morning. So you will have a direct opportunity to talk with him about what the parameters are for New Frontiers. Next slide, please. Okay, a few community updates for folks here. Next slide, please. The first thing I wanted to say is just an acknowledgement of the devastating loss of Arecibo in the fall. Arecibo was a great contributor to planetary science observations, particularly bistatic observations of objects in the solar system, and of course, particularly to characterization of near-Earth objects that it was able to observe and take radar observations of. So the Arecibo telescope will, of course, be missed. I know that Kelly will probably also have a few words to say about Arecibo when she speaks to you, but I wanted to acknowledge and thank the NSF for all of their support over the years, and thank the Arecibo folks. The facility not only was important to science, but also to the community within Puerto Rico, and we're extremely thankful for everything that they've done. And I believe that many of the activities, aside from the large dish, will continue going forward, but we will miss the dish. Next slide, please. Can we get the next slide? It's not showing for me yet. There we go. A few updates on the research programs. Hopefully you've all seen that there was a call for requests related to augmentations and funding extensions that are to offset negative impacts of COVID-19. These are specifically targeted at trying to assure that our most at-risk members of our community, in particular graduate students and postdocs that are really crucial parts of their career, that we don't lose those next generation researchers through a hole of lack of funding. So we are prioritizing those requests within SMD. All the science divisions are supporting these requests. That call came out in December. They are being evaluated and assessed. The requests are being evaluated and assessed as they come in. There is a deadline of March 5th, but send them in at any time, and we're looking at them and processing them as we go. We have already received a substantial number of requests, and the funding amount that's being requested is clearly going to be more than we have set aside. So we are looking very carefully at those priorities to try and stretch as far as we can go, and again, with the priorities to protect those at highest risk. I wanted to also mention an update on the dual anonymous peer review process. The first DAPR reviews have occurred outside of Planetary Science Division, and they've all gone really well. The feedback from the reviewers has been extremely positive, with comments like the discussion is much more focused on the science as opposed to focusing on the PIs or the team members or the facilities. And so this has been primarily seen as a very positive thing, but until we've finished all of the pilot studies of DAPR, once we've finished all of those pilot studies, we'll have a more complete report. Michael New, I expect, will be reporting out to the PAC with some feedback on how this has gone. But as I said, so far, very positive. Habitable Worlds from Roses 2020 is the Planetary Science Division participation in the pilot. And so that should be happening soon. For 2021, their decision has already been made based on the experience so far that all of our data analysis programs, lunar data, Mars data, discovery data, Cassini data, and New Frontiers data analysis programs will all be run as dual anonymous. In addition to the Exoplanets Research Program, which is a cross-divisional program, and there was agreement from all 4 divisions that program should also be run as dual anonymous. So those will be conducted in that manner going forward. Stephen Reinhardt asked that I give you notification or tell you about the notifications for selections, that the full statistics for each of the calls will now be provided on Inspires with the selected abstracts, as opposed to relying specifically on what goes into the letters. The letters may still contain some information, the selection letters, but the most up-to-date and reliable information will be maintained on Inspires. And then lastly, wanted to mention the new paradigm that we are introducing in Planetary Science, we'll be piloting in Planetary Science Division, is no due date. This is being rolled out for 7 programs, 7 of our larger programs in Planetary Science Division. It will roll out with Roses 2021, so it will be in effect beginning at the end of March. Stephen Reinhardt held an RNA town hall a few days ago, last week, to provide some general program updates and also to introduce no due date or nod to others. There's a link here in the slides for more information. I strongly encourage you to go look there. The presentation materials that he provided, as well as an FAQ, will be posted on that site. And of course, we're always open to answering questions about this new approach. Next slide, please. There was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, a request from SMD to the community to identify gaps in ROSES programs. There was a little bit of a delay in getting the analysis of this program completed, primarily because of ROSES, COVID impacts over the summer, but that analysis has been complete. Some of the major findings are listed here. A sample of some of these things is that some of the research projects that were recommended were for specific short-term projects, and trying to identify things that were perhaps a second or third priority for each individual discipline, but maybe should rise to higher level because of the cross-disciplinary nature. There was also emphasis on trying to better coordinate technology development across multiple disciplines, and also for science data and algorithms, science technologies and algorithms that could be better shared and coordinated across SMD. I encourage you to go look at this link here that's noted at the bottom that has more information on the gaps, and we are currently, SMD is currently in the process of making some recommendations and developing some actions for how to proceed based on those results. Just wanted you to know what happened to the data you sent in. Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. Community initiatives. Of course, the decadal survey panel meetings are ongoing. You're going to hear more from, it sounded like, from Nancy later. In the meeting, we just received several additional mission concept studies that the decadal survey would like us to conduct. And so we've already kicked those off and working on those to try and get the information that the panels need. We are still working toward a release of the final decadal survey by March of 2022, just over a year from now. And so that's going to be quite a challenge, but we're working, the national academies are working very hard to try and meet that desired deadline. And again, just to reemphasize, the importance of that deadline is that it can then feed into the NASA budget planning process, which will happen in the late spring of 2022, the budget planning for 2024 and beyond. So it is important to try and get that completed at that time. Wanted to mention, I've mentioned in some previous talks that SMD had requested a National Academies study to look at the topic of increasing diversity and inclusion in the leadership of competed space missions. That board actually has been staffed. That study is being performed under the Space Studies Board and the Board on Science Education. The committee's been appointed. Their first meeting is going to be in February, and the committee is going to be co-chaired by Fran Baganel and Wanda Ward. So we're very excited that that's getting kicked off. I think I've reported previously that as part of a PSD pilot study that Psyche and Europa Clipper and Dragonfly provided some opportunities for early career scientists to observe their science team meetings. Those have all three occurred, and we're in the process of assessing the lessons learned and trying to figure out how we'd like to proceed with those going forward. They all were received very positively, and so expect some similar types of activities in the future. And then I also wanted to make sure that I mentioned that the next PI Launchpad, we held the first one in 2019, went extremely well. We were a bit waylaid by COVID, but we are persevering with a virtual version of the next PI Launchpad happening in June. If you are interested, please make sure you look out for the application information. It'll be posted on Inspire soon, and the deadline for those applications will be March 22nd with notifications by May 3rd. So please look forward to that. And I think that may have been the last slide. Can we go to the next one, please, Shoshana?
Yes, okay, Lori, thank you so much. We do have time for a couple questions. If anybody wants to put them in the chat, I can also, I think it's easiest. We have so many participants, so I think it's easiest if people put them in the chat. Tarek's monitoring the chat and can read them.
That would be great.
Yeah. No questions yet, but we can wait a little bit. Tim Swindle asks, will there be 1 or 2 discovery selections? Any idea?
That's a really good question, the million-dollar question. There are a lot of parameters that go into that decision, depending on the actual missions that are in play for final selection, looking at budgets, looking at the out years. At this point, I will say I still would like to select 2, but there are a lot of challenges to that. So stay tuned. We'll try and provide more information as we get a more clear picture of what we're going to be able to do. It's a good question. And just for the record, I am actually recusing myself from the discovery selection process. And so to be completely honest, there's a lot of information I'm not in on at this point because I have recused myself. just to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, considering my prior participation on some of the candidate proposals that are in the mix. So I can give you the best information that I have. Thank you.
The next question comes from Josh Emery. Do you know yet when the next Simplex call might be?
That's another really, really good question, and I wish I could tell you with specificity when it's going to be. Let me just say that the lack of a specific next date for Simplex has nothing to do with the Simplex program or any doubt in the Simplex program. I'm really, really pleased with the Simplexes that we have selected so far and the progress that they're making. It's a fantastic program. The challenge is really pure and simple, trying to balance the various budgetary constraints that we have and trying to weave in a new program like Simplex into the existing priorities that we already have for discovery and new frontiers. And we just got a question about, will we get one or two discoveries? You know, discovery is got a high priority from the decadal survey, and so that has to come first in our priorities. But we really would like to see Simplex, and we're going to try and get in the next one when we can. And I'll definitely let people know as soon as there's an indication of when that next solicitation is going to be. And we are learning a lot from the ones that we ran this last time. It's been a great experience. We've learned a lot. We're in the process of pulling together some of those lessons learned. And when we do make the next call, we will be incorporating all that we've learned from this last go around.